Steve has done a good job of getting things organized for us. And, I'll let you and.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I've been accused of that. I said, we are now having our second reading of the Alternative Energy Overlay District. Steve has done a great job of organizing what we did 2 weeks ago with he and Joe. Put this out, and I'll let Steve take it over at this time.
Okay, so I have 5 more copies if anybody wants a copy of the very current. Joe updated this morning with some information, so Kelly wanted one down that way. Joe, if you could pass that around, Stephanie behind you. Hey, pass it back. There's 5 total more copies, and we had 5 this morning, so I know there's at least 10 copies floating around out there. And it's also online, right, Joe? The latest and greatest?
It will be as soon as we get it posted.
Okay. So, Joe's gonna help us go through this, but we had several minor updates from our last meeting with the input from Chad and Mark and myself, and we'll discuss a couple of those in more detail this morning. Excuse me. But we'll go through where we're at right now. As you get a chance to peruse the copies that are out there, everything that was changed should be highlighted in that reddish orange color, so if you see that, that's where those changes actually came through. There are quite a few little ones and a couple of significant ones. Other than that, they're fairly minor as we go through, with reference to solar as well as wind. Chad, have you had a chance this morning to read through that as well?
Yeah, I did. I looked through the sheet that you had emailed Joe Buffington with the bullet points and things, and yeah,
Okay. So I'll just go through it page by page, and I'm obviously not going to read it, but I'll hit on some of the highlights that we made some minor corrections to, so you can follow along with what you folks have. The first one was in 6.2.11.2, and again, 6.2.11.2 to 6.2.11.3, we're really talking about solar as well as wind, so we're trying to make sure that we incorporate the verbiage to make sure it is comprehensive across 6.2.11.2 and 6.2.11.3. So there may be a place we missed, but we'll try to fix that. If anybody sees one, let us know. And that really incorporates all the way down through probably page 4, I'm guessing. Yeah, all the way down through page 6. As we talk about all of those. One thing you will see is on page 4, under information required for to apply for an alternative energy overlay. Joe and I talked about this a little bit when we talk about where's the process, and there's some documentation, Joe. I know you have it in your head, and it's out there. There's a form online, right?
Well, there's a rezoning form.
Yeah, so I can
There's
show.
an application for rezoning.
And we looked at that this morning. And that was under GIS, right?
No, it's under, keep going, oh, yeah, keep going down, online application right there.
So under GIS, the beacon stuff, rather. There's how to apply for a permit online. So there are several applications.
So the rezoning application, down at the bottom of the center of the page.
Right there?
Right.
Okay. And that will start the process for whomever would like to get into that.
We've got some tweaks we're working on. I'm working on a Snyder with those right now, but they're not published yet, so.
Okay. Another change, I believe, on page 4, as you go down under information required, 3, D is in Delta, number 4, we made sure that we had the section references corrected to 6.2.11.3.2 and 6.2.11.4.2 as a detail, making sure that was current and correct. The same thing on page 5 under review and application, or review and approval procedures under section A. You'll see there's a highlighted section that refers to 6.2.11.4.2, A through D as well. Same thing as you go to page 6. We made a change to reference that same information. And then if you look at D, there are some changes to D as well, and that's why that's highlighted. And then as you follow that on down to G, we did add into that line item G, solar arrays, in addition to wind turbines. So we have solar covered as well in the initial application process. I know there's lots of details, so Chad or you or Mark have a question, holler at me. Page 8, 6.2.11.4, where we're really talking about commercial wind energy conversions. We did add a section on, in a section D, or excuse me, E as an elephant, fire detection and suppression. So that is new and included as well. We thought that was fairly significant. Page 9, under setbacks, we had a correction. County line, D, we had spelled out we said 1,640 feet, but the verbiage actually was back to the old context, so Joe changed that this morning to read 1,640 feet, and that's in red, so it should be pretty visual to everyone. As we go down just a little bit further, item E, we changed that from 1.1 times the height to 1.5. Going down to noise and adverse sound characters, Chad broke this down in pretty good detail under compliance and measurements, and that's why that's highlighted under D, 1 and 2, so it's a little more legible and easier to read. Page 10, we added a section under safety, acts of God, financial security. Item B is in beta. You'll see there's a red highlighted line there where we just added upgrading the escrow account and making sure it was same as the verbiage that we have later in the document as well. It's referenced about 3 different times throughout the document, making sure that those escrow accounts are replenished and they don't fall behind required standards. On page 11 at the very top, you'll see there's some highlighted area as well. Again, talking about property value guarantees and tying that back to 6.2.11.4 and making sure that we have all of those subsets covered as well. Further down, item 9 there, decommissioning and abandonment. If you look under decommissioning standards, item C, you'll see that area, or highlighted area is number 3 there with the 3 little bullets. A couple of minor changes there as well. You're pretty good so far, Chad?
Yep.
Mark? The next change was on page 13, and that's under financial security, under H, determination of abandonment. Item number 3, the 3 little bullets there. We just made a correction to make section F a small f to tie it back into the details that we're really talking about, so there was no confusion. Further down into that, we get into avoidance and mitigation of damages to public infrastructure. And we get into item C, which is really Jake's bailiwick here. And Jake and I talked about this a little bit. We're talking about under road use agreements, CWEX, and you can see we highlighted an area there and submit a road use agreement in the form attached to this ordinance. That may not be attached to this ordinance, but Jake, you want to speak to that for just a minute, please?
Yeah,
Since you're the resident expert.
so anytime an entity comes in, it's gonna do some work in the county that's gonna affect the road. So a construction project that the DOT would have, they actually develop haul routes that would be utilizing county roads. So there's an agreement that we have with the DOT that we assess the damages and we look at things prior. And so we have conditions that are specific to that one project. And that's why we don't, be a little careful on like having all the details right now. It's more of where are they gonna be at, how are they gonna use the road, and then we address what our needs are there. So Lee County's got quite a few examples. The draft that we have been looking at, it came from Washington County, which came from Kossuth County. And it gives you a template, but we don't want that to be a locked-in document. It needs to be a living document that allows us to address the needs of the time. So in my opinion, it would be that road user agreement will have to be worked out with the road department for whatever the project entails, whatever the project is. So ITC's gonna be coming through, they will be doing a road user agreement with Henry County Road Department once they tell us the roads and where they're gonna be working at, and then we'll assess what we want in there. So I think the language in here discussing the steps of what you need to get before you can apply means that you need to work with us early on to show us the routes that they're gonna be, how we're going to assess it. And again, the information is that the road has to be better than what it was when they started. So we not necessarily can ask them to build us a better road, but it has to be better than the condition that they started with, so they can't put us in worst case situations, so. And then the bonding escrow and all that stuff, that's kind of outside of our realm of what we're dealing with. Basically, there's some language that just talks about, I can acquire a bond if I want to for just the road purposes, but I think I'd have to see how that would merge with the two documents and stuff, so.
And that was what you had referenced earlier, right, Mark, when you were talking about getting visits on a regular basis with roads?
Correct.
Okay.
And this would also be a larger scale, so it would take a lot more time. I visited with the county quite a bit, or with Ben, with all the stuff, the fertilizer plant, so he's getting pretty familiar with that. So there's some communication that we're working on just to make sure that we're trying to cover all of our things.
Okay, good. So Chad, you know, we talked about this before as well, you're being an old DOT kind of guy yourself. Jake mentioned this some time ago, and he and I talked about this as well, but when we're doing the detour on 78 up north, he's gonna video that, so we'd have good documentation of where that road could be.
The DOT does the videoing, so that's part of the condition. Like a lot of times I'll ride along with them,
Okay.
not every time, but they're documenting the use of that DOT, of that haul route. And the same thing would be here, is we would require them to provide documentation, which would probably be me riding along with somebody from whoever the entity would be to evaluate what the road is. Like a lot of times you're just driving down the road, and you got water staying in this ditch that was there before we started, or this pavement section's already got deterioration there, or this pavement section's in good condition. So you're getting a video of that, so you can easily tell what the conditions were ahead of time.
And Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, if once that haul route or that project road use agreement was made, and there would be some freelance material haulers using a different route, they would not have the protections of the permitting and all that type, they would be in violation of
Correct.
certain regulations that they would be accountable for.
There are examples in the Kossuth County, Washington County template that talks about how you handle routes are not gonna be covered. So there's language in there, and there's some that actually require cameras to be put up in that area if they need to track that the owner who's doing the building or whatever would be responsible for. So in that example that we were looking at before with that draft, there is some language in there that talks about how do you handle when people are not following along. Ultimately, they are responsible for their subcontractors, and so our leverage is with whoever the entity is that's doing the improvement, whatever improvement it would be.
Okay, good, thank you. And it really comes back to the same thing again on page 14, where you go down to bullet point number 4, kind of the same thing you just talked about. Any damages are gonna be really brought to your attention so that we can get in and get those fixed on a timely basis.
Yeah, and the road user agreement would have language in there. I think gravel roads is probably the bigger issue, but with a bigger entity like this, paved roads could be a concern. But on a gravel road, if they're not responsive, there's language in those road users agreements that we can go in and say, we're not gonna wait for you to fix this, we're gonna fix it. Everything's gonna be billed to you, so for those damages, we want to stay away from that. We try to lay the groundwork that they're responsible for that road, but there is a provision in there that allows us to step in and make sure we have a road usable for the public.
Okay, and that kind of gets back to our conversation with escrow versus bonding there at that point too, to make sure that we have funds available, to be able to get paid back on a timely
Yeah,
basis.
that's outside of
Yeah.
my background, but
Well,
yeah.
just for our conversation as well, but yeah. Joe, you have a comment?
I just, this phrase in the form attached to this ordinance, I would.
Drop that.
Just write that, yeah.
I think
Councilor
that's-
Mayor says, on page 13, it's highlighted in orange, that in the form attached to this ordinance, because that would require us to develop a form attached to the ordinance, really tying into a certain thing.
And we don't wanna do that, but I think we need to make reference at least to some kind of a contact with county engineer to make sure that.
I mean, it's requiring him to submit a road use agreement, it's just not tying it to a specific form within the ordinance.
Yeah, are you good with that, Chad, as well?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
And the road use ordinance, if the road use agreement comes to you guys and you don't think it's sufficient, you can always kick it back to Jay. Okay, we need more. So, I think that covers your responsibilities with that.
engineer, because it might be somebody else.
What are you trying to tell us?
I'm not saying anything else.
Okay,
Having fun.
Thank you very much, Jake, I think that helps considerably. Again, I think if you look down, that really is at your discretion as we start to do that. I think for us, Chad and Mark, can think about this as we talk through this. Again, if we talked about escrow versus bonding, and that really gets back to what Jake just said, you know, the county's gonna fix that road no matter what, but how long is it gonna take us to get our money back? Okay, so it could be fairly substantial. And we can talk about that here in just a minute when we get into financial security, which is coming up next. As you look at page 15, we talked about financial security. About halfway down the page, bullet number 5. You see that again, we put that verbiage in there to make sure the escrow account is replenished as it's used, so that it doesn't deplete itself over time. Same thing as you go to item number 6 and 7. Again, added that verbiage to make sure that those accounts don't deplenish and go to zero balance.
Before we get too far past it,
Yep, where you at?
on 14, Roman numeral 4, we made a change in there as directed by the county engineer. But going through that whole section, I really think that that entire section should just be removed.
You mean like the whole section for any damage in roads, bridges, or
Or
infrastructure?
the $5,000 per day, we can't go.
Yeah, that's
It's contrary to state law,
or code, yeah,
code, yeah,
because it's $750 a day.
right, and we can't, we can't assess that dollar amount, that dollar amount's gonna be determined by a judge, we can't just say you're gonna pay this. So, I think this goes back to the road use agreement and let Jake determine, or the county engineer, whoever happens to be, what those conditions are gonna be. How soon things need to be fixed and all that stuff to be written in there per agreement.
Your thoughts on that, Jake? You already talked about?
Yeah, the dollar amount and stuff, I think less is more on this, in this area here, as the road use agreement has to be agreed upon by the county engineer, and which also includes you guys in that, so whatever road use agreement that we get to, you guys will be involved with it as well, to make sure that it meets the county's requirements. So it's part of the application, if I'm understanding it, they have to have that in place before they can actually submit, right, Joe?
Correct.
Okay. So I think it's extra language that wouldn't be necessary.
So I'm gonna ask a question because I don't know the answer to it. When you have let's say take the Wool project. You know, if that contractor did that work and then just stopped doing it for a while, wasn't there some type of, you'll have this job completed within so many working days or anything like that? You know,
Any contract that we run through the DOT there's different criteria. You can have a completion date, you can have a number of working days, and then there is damage, but that's a specific contract for work that they bid on, that both parties have entered into. And I think that's where this comes into, it's not necessarily a contract that we're signing, it's dealing with specifically the conditions of what they're under contract.
so something like that would be under more of the road use agreement at that point in time, not assess a fine of $5,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure what fines that I could assess in that road use agreement. I think it's more about, again, the condition of the road use agreement is to bring the road back to where it was at a time. There's language that it says will cease, that you can have in there, so they can't do any other work. We're gonna pull their application of their permit in order until they restore whatever was damaged. I think that's the language that we have on, at least on quick, and I'm not a lawyer. I think that would come into whatever road use agreement we have would have to go to our county attorney to review as we finalize it, make sure we're covered.
Your thoughts on that? You wanna keep it or
No, I think,
part of it?
well, I would remove it on that recommendation.
Where you at?
Yeah, I don't have any expertise in it. I guess I'd rely on the.
The road use agreement takes care of it, and you have control of that.
I'd just like to see it again, road, or just the first sentence anyway.
just for reference, any damage to roads, bridges, or other infrastructure shall be corrected as directed by the county engineer. I know that falls into this, but the road use agreement, I'm sure, but I think we just need to make sure we're covered. Devil's in the
I
details.
guess you could say corrected per road use agreement, I guess.
Okay, I'm good with that. Per road use agreement. At least we have some reference to all that. Okay. Did you have another question, Joe?
No, I'm not yet.
And that road use agreement would stipulate a time frame of repairs to be made and things like that.
There can be linkage in there, yeah. I think the bigger, usually the thing that's gonna hold that weight is if they aren't responsive, work ceases, for what else they're doing at that point. And that, there's a language in some of those examples that we were looking at, but again, it's tailoring it to whatever the project is, and in our case, it's not always gonna be a wind farm, it may be something else, is that we would develop that for whatever entity's coming through.
That makes sense. As we go on through, there are just some little typos that Joe and I worked on and corrected, and you'll see those highlighted. And Rick, Chad, and Mark, same thing on page 17. One little correction about the middle of the page, again, it's highlighted. And then on page 18, on the very back, nothing major there, that's highlighted as well. But it ties into what we've already previously talked about. And that's really it for that.
Two things we talked about previously, I just wanted to bring them up before we, on page 1, second paragraph under 211.2, that lays out this specific area for the overlay zone. I think that really hamstrings you guys into a specific area. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, maybe terrain issues, maybe whatever else, it's gonna either require you to come back and amend this ordinance to change it to what you want it to, or send it to the board of adjustment to allow a variance to what it says. I think it's much easier to just leave this out and the board determine what that overlay district encompasses on a case-by-case basis. I don't see any reason, I mean, you guys have got discretion, I don't see any reason to put you in a box.
You're talking about the area that's highlighted.
Right, this, in orange here, this 100-foot by 100-foot, that may in some circumstances not work, and this is gonna bind you to that regardless. Whereas if you leave that out, the overlay district is whatever you determine it to be. I think that's
So
what-
we're
that's what-
making anything 100 by 100 overlay district.
Well, this is just saying that that's what that's all the overlay district can be, is 100-foot by 100-foot around this tower, and there may be circumstances where that may not work. I don't know what they may be, but there's possibility. If you wanna make it exactly like this, when you do it, you can, but it doesn't bind you to that if there's some circumstance that it doesn't work.
Chad, what are your thoughts?
I need it explained a little bit more, both sides, so I can get a good feel.
The limits are control.
Well, it says, this is what you have to bring, regardless of the circumstances. This is what you're required to do this regardless of the circumstances. And if the circumstances don't work, right now, the only way to address that is to send it to the board of adjustment, and they can look at it on a case-by-case basis, and they could vary this per the variance part of the ordinance. But if you leave it out, you can just determine it to be whatever the board of supervisors decides.
And you're talking specifically the 100-foot by 100-foot.
Well,
You would still leave the alternate energy overlay district boundary for one industrial wind turbine
I wouldn't-
in a parcel.
One per parcel, yeah, I don't have any issues with that. That's the density you want, you can put, that's, the density's fine. But as far as, no other rezoning specifies the boundaries of the rezoning. It's determined by you guys in each individual rezoning.
So when I look at that, I think, I understand what you're saying, we're limiting those, but I think that's the whole process here, is to help create not necessarily restrictions, but to make sure that we have some boundaries to work with. So I think, Mark, I would take the other side of that conversation and say, it's not really limiting or restricting, it's giving us a more specific parameter to work with, so that we don't get some enormously crazy thing that we have to look at each and every time.
The way I understand it, it takes us, if this happens, it would take us out of our control and put it on to the board of adjustment, and we have no say after that.
If it would go to a variance, yeah,
Yeah.
you would have no control at all.
Who determines if it goes to the board of adjustment?
Well, if they ask for a variance of what this boundary is, it would, by the ordinance, it would go to the board of adjustment. That's the framework for appeal to something, to a specific set of if the ordinance says 50 feet from the road, and you wanna be 40 feet from the road, it goes to the board of adjustment. If this says 100 by 100, and it needs to be 110 by 100 because of some circumstance, you're varying that ordinance directive, so it goes to the board of adjustment. If you don't have this,
That's how it works.
Out of our hands, completely.
if you don't have this, then it's completely up to you.
What are your thoughts, Chad?
I guess my take is, I would like to see us set that rule, and you get somebody on an appeals board or the adjustment board, and they may have a whole different view on the whole world than what is going on. And it gives them that opportunity to change things around, so I like the idea of this board setting the parameters for it to be in and not being adjustable.
So what, I don't understand what you're saying, you wanna leave it in? I'm saying if you leave it in, we have no control.
It goes back to the board of adjustment.
Right, and then we don't have any
And
control.
I don't like that idea.
I'm sure we're on the same page, Jared.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Joe's point is here, but I think I would like to see it stay in, because I think the parameters are pretty realistic. When you talk about 100 by 100, 1,000 square feet, wow.
I mean, the company will know exactly where they want to put that, the unit.
Okay, absolutely.
So can they get that bullseye within 100 foot by 100 foot?
Well, you would hope so. Considering, right? Everything else is pretty detailed. Yeah. Like, holy mackerel.
My understanding is we leave it out, and we still have control of it entirely.
You can still make it 100 by 100.
Yeah, whatever. It's in the board of supervisors control, not in the board of adjustments.
Correct. It doesn't keep you from making, you can still use this as a policy, but it doesn't tie you to it. And you can make the adjustments to it as opposed to the board of adjustment. If it's not in there, if it's in there, then it's part of the ordinance, and it has to be very clear.
Chad, you're for taking it out? Or leaving it in?
I want the decision to be the board of or board of supervisors.
So you are saying remove it?
So I'm saying, let's take the 100 foot by 100 foot out, and we can say, here it is, or no, or not, there it is, right?
I mean,
We would have that call.
you'd have the call to draw the boundaries wherever
But
you see fit.
if a plan were to come up and they put the X mark right there, and if we wouldn't agree to that idea, we can say, no, that won't be the location for it.
Correct, absolutely.
And Mark, you're for removing it?
I'm for removing it. For that very reason, what Chad just said.
Yeah, and I understand that totally. I just get back to the whole thing, 100 by 100, that's 10,000 square feet, boy. With the way we are today, with GPS technology, if we can't be any closer than 10,000 square feet, we are in a world of hurt. So I vote to leave it in, but That's 2-1.
You wanna have a motion, just put it in the minutes?
You need to have a, to do this. you
Just,
have to
just to be
have a vote.
clear, what you're doing, first you need a motion to approve what you amended last week. Then you have your discussion, now you're talking about other changes, additional changes from what you approved last week. So you're gonna need to then, make a motion to amend it to add those things.
So, legally, we can go on and discuss what we're looking at first of all, and then have a motion to amend what we approved last week, and then amend what we just said.
We're kinda backwards, but.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and have amendment first, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Let's start with first, put a motion on the table
Okay.
to approve
Okay, that's,
the ordinance as amended last week.
that's right.
Or
Okay.
just a motion to
So we'll
approve
have
the
that.
ordinance from last week.
I'll make a
2 weeks ago,
I'll entertain a motion to approve what we amended last week.
not 2 weeks ago.
2
weeks
two
ago.
weeks ago.
Sorry.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the corrections that we made from 2 weeks ago.
Is there a second?
I will second
Any other discussion?
Okay, now you're gonna have discussion on that, and you've been actually having that discussion now. And so if somebody, was what you were just talking about, was that in last time's version?
Correct.
Okay, so this would be an additional change, so it'd be a
So we need a
motion,
motion to remove this
amend
portion.
it to remove that, yes.
To remove that.
They didn't just.
You should probably also include removing that other short sentence we removed.
Well,
Like-
can we go one by one?
Yeah, I think that's.
You-
Let's do one by one.
You can, because you
Oh,
have
that's
on
okay.
which amendment you wanna approve.
On this, we will take this one in, the second paragraph under alternative energy overlay district. 6-11-2.
Item 1.
Okay. Is there a motion to remove that?
I'll make the motion with discussion.
I'll second it. Any discussion?
I just don't wanna be jumped into something for some legalese or some little word usage and that type of thing. I just don't like that idea of getting,
I understand your perspective on that. I understand yours as well, Mark. I just keep going back to this 10,000 square feet. With technology the way it is today, they have to have a plan. They have to have a really detailed plan from everything that we've seen here. So that's why I'm voting to keep it in. So it's 2-1.
We
You wanna
have,
vote?
well, I'll call for the, call a motion, we have a second, now we'll have a vote on that. All those in favor of removing, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
yeah, I'm good. In discussion, I mean, I know you're frustrated with me, I know, but this is the important thing. 100 square foot, if they put the X here and we wanna build it here, and the Board of Supervisors does not agree with that, for whatever reason. I mean, maybe it's 13 feet off somebody's front porch. We don't want that, we can say, no, this is not approved.
Well, I think to your point, we already have a setback in position that would not allow that.
Yeah,
A through D on 6-11-4.
but if it was on somebody's pond dam and it would require the draining and of that pond, or whatever the case be.
Yeah, it could be. I'm pretty sure in that part of the world there are very few of those. That would be the exception, yeah.
I like the idea of the Board of Supervisors having the control. I will vote to make this thing.
Any against?
I'd vote no.
2-1 to remove that section. We need to continue on other ones that we have changed.
Very specifically, Mark, we had some minor changes as we go through there. So
The minor ones, I'm not looking at, the minor ones, the next one I really see is, on page 13.
Actually, we have one on page 8, that's it. Yeah, under 6-11-4. Item E, fire detection and suppression.
We didn't change it, did
We added to it, we didn't have that in there.
We-
sorry, Jeff.
we? But, you know, we are working on amendments now.
But this would be an amendment to 2 weeks ago, right? Joe?
So did you make that amendment 2 weeks at the meeting?
We made that 2 weeks ago. So we're looking at changes upon what we received
Okay.
after 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
So my next one I had is on page 18, on that, removing that.
In the form check, attached to this ordinance, yeah.
Okay. I make a motion to remove that.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I just think the input from Jake was extremely valuable, and obviously we need to rely on our subject expert to help us through this. He's the subject expert, as well as Joe, so yeah, I think was good discussion from Jake.
Okay. With that, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Remove.
The last thing I wanted to point out is on page 6, under public hearing. This requires extra public hearings that don't be on what the Code of Iowa requires. The first point is, if we're gonna do extra hearings, why limit it to just this one thing? Why don't we write extra hearings in for quarries and racetracks and airports and other things that have significant impact? The other side being is, why tie us to 3 public hearings that cost the county money, where they may not necessarily, if you wanna have 3 hearings, have 3 hearings. If you write it in there, you have to have them. There may be circumstances where you don't want to or don't need to, but you're stuck doing it. You gotta pay for publication, you gotta spend money on that, and
Okay, I guess my question in that reference was kind of off subject to where Mark was going, but the question would be, this is an overlay. So I think it's a little bit different from that perspective. Doesn't fit into everything, it overlays the existing, right?
right, but it's still more public hearings than is required by the Code of Iowa. Like I said, if you wanna have 3 hearings on anything, have 3 hearings.
But
You can
that's
make them.
specific to this, to a wind ordinance, right? It's very specific to the wind ordinance. It's
Right.
an overlay.
But, you know, there are other, I mean, it's an overlay just because of how towers are put up, but it's, you know, you have other things that have far-reaching impacts. Like I said, you're gonna build a new airport in the county, that's not gonna happen, but, you know, it's, that is an example. Or a quarry that has a wide range, you know, racetracks, other things that may affect a lot of people, they may want three readings too, 3 hearings. You know, so why not write 3 hearings in for all of those things that have a big impact? Or, like I said, leave it as required by the Code of Iowa, and if you determine that that needs 3 extra, you know, 2 extra hearings, you make a motion and have 2 extra hearings. And the circumstance is such that you don't think it's necessary, then don't do it. But to make us, you know, spend money on publication and so on. Makes no sense to me. It doesn't stop you from doing it, but this forces you to do it.
You couldn't just rephrase that section to say, instead of no less than 3 public hearings, it would be 1 or more public hearings.
I mean, that's already,
And that's,
I mean,
that,
that's already there.
well, and that's,
In the-
but that's what you're suggesting for
Right,
'em.
but that exists for everything already. They can
Right.
always have more hearings on.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, we
Yeah.
can use that language
Yeah,
here.
if you wanna specifically state that.
I'd be okay with that, yeah, I don't wanna take it out, but I think we could say that, 1 or more, and it'd be up to us to make that determination.
Yeah.
Instead of phrasing it as no less than 3.
So
One or more.
Since we're here, we'll go ahead, is there a motion to change the verbiage there?
Yeah, I can make a motion to change that verbiage, to 1 or more. It's a good compromise.
Just good news. Okay, is there a second to that?
There's a second.
Any other discussion?
certainly don't wanna take the opportunity for anybody to, if they wanna speak on it, I wanna give them every opportunity to do that.
All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed, none. Continuing on. Did you have anything before that? No. 13, or page 11? Yeah. Page 13. And we already voted on that. Correct. Voted on that. Okay, now, 14. We change that 4 to the road use agreement.
Right, and as directed by the county engineer.
Is there a motion to remove that and stipulate it says per road use agreement by the, direction of county engineer? And I'll set it there, Joe.
Right.
So I think what we said was any damage to roads, bridges, or other infrastructure shall be corrected per the road use agreement as overseen by the county engineer.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Is there a second?
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I think the verbiage there will correct that.
Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. Any other, anybody see?
Has it been fully and totally determined, the term escrow and bond? I mean, has that come to a?
So do we vote on all those changes are approved then? We did one by one, so we're good with everything?
The only final vote is approving this ordinance now as amended.
Or if you're making any changes as Chad discussed right now.
Yeah, all the changes that you made today,
Under,
that would be under this vote.
We can approve what you want to talk about, bond versus escrow.
Yeah.
is that,
But if you're gonna add that in, then
Maybe
you're,
up.
you're,
is that-
go ahead with discussion and then see if you need another motion to amend.
Yeah.
Because it's in there as an escrow at this point, so we wouldn't have to change anything. But my perspective, as I look at that and listen to what Heidi, she's the subject matter expert here, and listen to what Jake has said, is I still lean toward the escrow because those balances, those funds are immediately available to us rather than having a delayed period of time where we have to go through a process. And we all know what it's like to go through an insurance process to get a claim. I'm not sure a bond would be any different. And my experience with the folks in Mariah County tells me that whole discussion between a bond and an escrow would have benefited them had they done this some time ago as well. So I think the ability to have escrow dollars available to us on a more current basis, quickly accessed, would give us a better advantage to be able to hold any entity more accountable. And if they sell the entity, then that entity has to create an escrow again to fulfill those needs.
And that portion could be in the ordinance, that it transfers over, but the ordinance says it has to keep moving forward. That's on that.
Concurrent with whoever the property owner
We have to
owner
put that
is.
into the ordinance then. But my other question is, when you're saying $5 million, are you talking for all projects that happen?
Just the one project, $5 million.
Or let's say it's 30 towers, it's $5 million, if it's 20, it's 10 towers, it's $5 million. Okay,
And the reason for that, Mark, is because as you look through here, we say under the financial security that we have a limitation of whatever the cost estimate is, it's 150% of whatever that value is.
okay, I
And that's
understand,
why, yeah.
but I just, that was a question early on raised to me,
Yep.
so, how that is.
So with that, is there a renewal or a, you know, if part of that escrow fund gets, let's say it gets diminished by, you know, $500,000 on a cleanup issue or anything, how do we put it so that brings right back up? You know,
It's written.
it's written in there and
That's where you add it.
that's clear enough to cover bases on it?
Yeah, if it falls below 90% of the
Okay.
of the original value that has to be replenished. And that's why we changed that like 3 different times in the document. And to Mark's point was, you know, we're talking the overlay, 150% of the total identified cost for decommissioning, so I think that covers us. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Perfectly, thank you. And after what our explanation was this morning, clarifies things for me.
Sure.
So, are you saying then, Chad, we do not need to make any changes then other than what you're?
I think it's already written with escrow in place right now, right?
That is correct.
So therefore, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
We've already got it on the
motion,
table.
We got the motion and a second. So now we have to vote on it with those corrected amendments.
Yes, you made all these amendments to it, so now you call a roll call vote, because it's ordinance, and, just to approve it as we've now amended it at today's meeting.
I'll make a motion to,
Well, can I just ask a question, one thing, real quick, do you need to clarify the portion of what we said we put in the ordinance, was
which part, we changed a couple of things.
no, it wasn't that. Okay, I'll think about it, I can add it next week if I have to,
Sure, absolutely.
write it down, okay. You're making that motion?
Yes,
Or
I
we
did.
already- It's your roll call, which it says now.
Made a motion to,
Oh, do-
take
We've already
Two
done
votes.
roll call.
Just
Just
do
roll
roll
call
call
now.
vote.
So Dietrich,
yes.
Mindy,
Yes,
White.
Yes.
motion passes of the second reading of the alternative energy overlay district ordinance as we have presented it today. Okay.